Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond Clean, Beyond the Shelf virtual conference. This has been a full day dedicated to exploring the future of sterile storage in the OR and SPD. I'm Melanie Perry from Beyond Clean, and I really just wanted to take a moment to thank you for being here today. Thank you for hanging out with us, for joining us, and for engaging with us in this great discussion about sterile storage. For those of you who are anxiously awaiting your CE credits, after viewing all of today's sessions, you'll have access to the full conference survey, and then you will be able to download your CE certificate. Joining us next is Tom Kratko, Vice President of Sales at OneTray IST. Tom is passionate about connecting frontline technicians with the tools and products they need to succeed while helping to keep patients safe. Differentiating between event-related, shelf life, and time-related expirations is tricky business for any frontline technician. But Tom is here to explain the key differences between these expiration practices, as well as help to determine which is best for your healthcare facility. Tom will finally help us answer the age-old question, which expiration policy do we follow? So without further ado, let's welcome Tom Kratko.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Kratko. I'm currently the Vice President of Sales for Innovative Sterilization Technologies, IST OneTray. My background is I started my career off many, many years ago as a U.S. Navy hospital corpsman, as well as an OR tech in the Navy. I spent about 7 years scrubbing cases, mainly in orthopedic and spine. Which further led me into my career of spent almost 15 years as a spine rep for a time with Synthes Spine and many years with K2M, which is now part of Stryker. Having said that, when I relocated from Baltimore, Maryland to Cleveland, Ohio, my hometown, I made a lateral move. I was continuing to sell K2M Spine here in Ohio for about a year. But in that process, I became also the distributor for OneTray. So I'm very excited about this topic that we're going to discuss today regarding event-related shelf life and the differences between expiratory dating as well. It's been something that I've been involved with since I was about 18 years old in the operating room, and I've been in the operating room setting my entire career. One of the things that I have found that in the operating room, sometimes we use a lot of interchangeable terms, and we all kind of say one thing and mean another. And I think this is a perfect topic because I think a lot of times in my travels within my role, I see that there's sometimes a bit of confusion between expiratory dating, event-related, and what the role of the hospital really is. So I wanted to do a little deep dive into that with everybody today, and here we go. So I have a few disclosures I need to talk about before we can get into the presentation. I have disclosed that I do not have any financial interest related to this presentation. The opinions expressed in this presentation are my own. I have discussed that I will not be I have disclosed that I will not be discussing unlabeled use of approved products and/or investigational use of commercial products that are not yet approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, affectionately known as the FDA, for any purpose. So the objectives that I would like to discuss today with you guys is simply discuss and define the history of the term event-related. Number two, examine the similarities and differences between shelf life, time-related, event-related, as well as expiratory dating, and determine which method works best for your healthcare facility. So the discussion behind the history of event-related sterility, which I found to be quite interesting in my research, one of the earliest papers that I found was in the early 1980s, I believe it was in 1984, and it was a paper written by a Mr. Dan Mayworm entitled Sterile Shelf Life and Expiratory Dating. This was a process that hospitals were looking at because, quite frankly, of cost initiatives and rotating stock and being able to live in a world of expiratory dating. So rotating that stock was very time consuming for employees, and they were looking for, a few different ways. And, little different stories that have happened all over the country. I recall one story that I kind of researched where a nurse was down in sterile storage and she had found some muslin wrapped sterile goods, and it was from the World War II era. So she went and had these sterile goods tested to see if they were still sterile, and in fact they were. So that really got the hospitals to start thinking, do we need to continue to rotate stock on expiratory dating? Is there a better way? In the sterile processing packaging world, whether you're using a muslin wrap, you're using double ply, single ply, quote unquote blue wrap, if you're using a rigid container, peel packs, etc., there is no internal clock on these packaging system devices that allows the packaging system to say, oh, I'm on sterile. That's just not the way that it works. So this practice of availability starts to become very popular, and then again around the mid 1980s. Again, based off the research that I found. And having said that, I'd like to kind of get into what is the definition of event-related sterility. So event-related sterility really comes down to it's sterility maintenance that is not based on expiration dating, but rather factors such as quality of the packaging material, storage conditions, methods and conditions of transport, of the amount of conditions of the handling. So basically what all that means is event-related sterility is if it stays on a shelf after post-sterilization and there's not a hole in the wrapper, the load lock has not been compromised. After opening up a package and you're checking your filters, there's not a hole in a filter. If there's any events that take place while it's sitting on a shelf, it is considered to be contaminated, and you need to start that process of sterilization over for that OR asset, whatever it may be. So, Amy and ARON, they give us guidelines for sterility factors. And again, it goes to the packaging material, the storage conditions, the transport, the handling of said goods. And again, in the operating room, as everybody's very familiar of, majority of sterile processing departments, are sometimes in the basement or the floor below or above the operating room. So the CS folks are handling and transporting, putting it on a case cart. An OR person may come and get their case cart. The sales reps might get involved and touch, certain packages that are theirs for their case. So there's a lot of different handling, and that's where we get a lot of instances where events take place because you have a hole in a wrapper or something like that from the sets just being moved around a lot. So that is in essence of what event-related sterility is that the contents of the package are considered sterile unless an event takes place. So having said that, there's a lot of different governing bodies that we all get our best practices from, be it AMY, be it ARON, CMS, the Joint Commission. There's a lot of different entities that help us maintain, and policy is very important for hospitals, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So again, going back to the ARON guidelines, it gives us a little bit of a rule book on how to handle our sterile packaging to avoid potential events happening. And also it gives us an opportunity to have some just rules in place of how to rotate stock, things of that nature. So and this is where I think people start to get confused about a little bit, and when we kind of interchange our terms. So I'd like to get into the differences and some of the similarities between shelf life, time-related, event-related, as well as expiratory dating. So I'd like to do a little dive into shelf life. So the definition, the healthcare facility should be establish policies and procedures to determine shelf life. Shelf life for facility sterilized items is event related and should not be based on the quality of the packaging material, the storage conditions, the methods and conditions of transport, and the amount of conditions of handling. According to the FDA, shelf life is a term or period during which a commodity remains suitable for its intended use. An expiration date is the termination of shelf life. Shelf life is a period of time during which a sterile item is considered safe to use. As event-related shelf life is, again, what we just previously discussed. If you have a sterilized item and some event takes place, be it moisture, be it a hole in a wrapper, be it a load lock has been compromised. And I think we sometimes use those interchangeable terms between shelf life and event-related. So the shelf life simply, with all the jargon, if we can just dissect that for a moment, again, there's no internal clock on our packaging system. So the shelf life has an end date of a manufacturer's IFU, where they have their scientific shelf life studies, meaning a packaging system has to go through scientific testing in order to prove whether it's 48 hours, 30 days, 180 days, 365 days of sterility maintenance. The shelf life is considered, again, event related. So if you have a sterile package on a shelf sitting in the operating room or in sterile processing, and you go to use it 14 days after it's been sterilized, and if your hospital is practicing event-related policies, that packaging material is considered sterile until it is needed, and then that shelf life comes to an end once you aseptically open that lid. And then it is up to the end users to, again, check for holes in wrappers, again, load locks that may have been compromised, to have no doubt that this sterile package has been presented as it's intended and it remains its sterility. And again, in the simplest terms, shelf life is just a period of time which a commodity remains suitable for its intended use. So unless an event happens within that intended use, that's where the event-related sterility comes in, and then that's where the expiratory dating, if you will, of shelf life. I always affectionately tell people that, we cannot test for infinity and beyond because nobody would be there for the results. So all these packaging materials that are at our disposal in our hospitals, be it generic blue wrap, be it any other rigid container on the market, be it peel packs, again, old muslin wrap, we're not using that a lot anymore, if at all. Everybody has to have policies in place, whether your hospital is event related or expiratory dating, and that will determine, again, sort of the shelf life, if you will, of packaged goods. So time related and expiratory dating, I like to talk about that a little bit with everyone. Time related, identify with an exact expiration date, and an item is considered unsterile after said expiration date. So again, this is policy driven for the item is considered unsterile after expiration date. So if you have a policy in place in your hospital and you're utilizing expiratory dating, that packaging system that may be utilized will have an IFU, will have a shelf life, will have an expiration date. So therefore, you know what, I'm going to back up and do that over because I stumbled over my words. Item is considered unsterile after expiration date. So when you're utilizing a packaging system, that packaging system will have an IFU, and it has to have some end date of when that sterile packaging system has reached its expiration date. Because again, we can't test scientifically to prove that the sterile contents in any packaging system is sterile for infinity. Again, there's just not a scientific test for that. So again, expiratory dating now defines a product's estimated useful life. calculated by adding time to the date of the manufacture or sterilization. So that goes back to the packaging systems that we're utilizing and their IFUs when they do their validation studies and they test for how long that a packaging system has been proven to maintain its sterility for X amount of time. So now we're coming to, when does a hospital choose to go with the best method for them, be it expiratory dating, be it event related? Approximately 95% of the country utilizes event related sterility for their facilities. It is imperative that the hospitals put policies in place to speak to that specifically. And how this is all kind of married and put together and how a hospital will be able to determine, their policies for event-related sterility. There's a lot of different decision makers and influencers, and it starts with the FDA. They regulate medical devices by requiring manufacturers to demonstrate performance and to provide that information to their users. But the FDA does not regulate healthcare practices. That is extremely important. AMI-ST 79, this is a document that provides a roadmap to best practices for healthcare organizations to follow. This is not legally enforceable document, except for in New Jersey. It has decided to use, in this particular state, their inspectors, that is an enforceable document. ARON, the Association of Perioperative Registered Nurses, founded in 1949. The ARON has more than 41,000 registered nurses in the United States and abroad who facilitate in the management, teaching, and practices of perioperative nursing, who are enrolled in nursing education or engaged in perioperative research. Again, ARON provides healthcare organizations with a best practice guideline, but also is not legally enforceable. The Joint Commission, CMS, HHAC, again, these are DNV. They're all ways to ensure standards for hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers. Their goal is to ensure quality of patient care and safety. Hospitals and the ASCs. So the hospital and the hospital systems have their own individual organizational structures, and it's different from hospital to hospital. So again, it could be, depending upon their organizational structure, you have your C-suites, your CEOs, COOs, things of that nature. You have supply chain, you have individual departments with managers, assistant managers, often lead technicians play a big role in implementing and coming up with policy. So it really truly is incumbent upon the hospital to develop policies and procedures on how to implement medical devices, such as packaging systems, and determining shelf life practices if you're event related or, again, expiratory dating. So once a hospital kind of will sit down, and a lot of different factors will come involved. And I think over the years, again, with 95% of the country having gone to event related, it's training and education of the staff and staff turnover. It is cost. Cost is a huge factor in determining, expiratory dating or event related practices. The types of packaging materials that are available to a said hospital based off of their resources. So again, I know in my world as a sales rep for spine, we always wanted as many of our sets in rigid containers because, for the fear of holes in wrappers and things of that nature. So again, in today's world, being able to be reproducible and not have a lot of waste, a lot of landfill waste for disposable items. All these different things come into factor. Energy use. Energy use is a big one. That's why, again, you do see some different products coming to market in the sterile processing packaging world that are trying to streamline processes, save energy, save cost, save manpower, working hours. And again, we want reproducible outcomes for our patients. And I think going back to how we kind of started our conversation today, you know, when you're practicing event-related policies and you have, you know, these different three-headed monsters of who regulates medical devices, AAMI, ARON guidelines, the Joint Commission, CMS, DMV, et cetera. So we're all trying to do ultimately what's always best for our patients and making sure that, you know, we take the best possible care and offer, you know, what the first patient of the day gets, the 15th patient of the day gets. Being able to reproduce, you know, sterile assets for the operating room that are in a quick, timely fashion, but in a safe, sterile manner is our ultimate goal. So I believe that sometimes the actual shelf life is sometimes interchangeable with event related. And again, they're two very unique, very different things. And with regards to the manufacturers, and they have, you know, again, different shelf life studies. And then, so you have to kind of be able to marry all of this different amounts of information from IFUs, from guidelines, from AAMI and ARON, et cetera. And then you have to come up with the best practices for your hospital, your employees, and ultimately your patients. So it sometimes can be a bit of a daunting task, but again, that is why it's so imperative for the hospitals and their organizational leadership to develop policies and procedures that can clearly define how they're utilizing sterile packaging and how they're implementing said sterile packaging. Again, if they're in an event-related hospital, you literally can leave packages on the shelf until an event happens, or somehow it's been compromised to determine it is potentially not sterile, and to either get another set or reprocess said set. All right, well, it's been my pleasure today to speak with everybody. And my hope and my goal here is to kind of help everybody shed some light on the hospital's perspective on them having the ability to take a lot of information, be it from the manufacturers, the vendors, the Joint Commission, accreditation world, our accrediting bodies of ARON, AAMI, et cetera. It's a lot of information. And, you know, one of the things that I respected so much in my background when I was a scrub tech, you know, I need to know patient positioning to the last steri strip that went on the patient. There's a lot of information that needs to be concentrated on to help have a patient have a successful outcome in their surgery. When you become a spine rep like I've been, we're so micro-focused on one aspect of that patient care. So again, when I go on a sales call into a facility and there's this big gray area regarding shelf life. And also in part, one of the things that, you know, shed a huge spotlight on for me was, if you look at the marketplace and you look at the industry for packaging systems, you know, we really haven't had a lot of innovation and technology implemented into this world in almost 50 years. It's been about 8-9 years of, you know, some products coming out to the market that's really kind of challenged the status quo. And I always kind of affectionately tell people, you know, I look at our quote unquote blue wrap, all of our other rigid containers, that they're tried, they're true. We know how they work. They work well. They've worked for many decades. And it kind of reminds me of, you know, the internal combustible engine. You know, the oil industry doesn't want to change. They resist. And that's, you know, my humble opinion, you know, why I think we've seen, you know, some technology, you know, slowly implemented into, you know, electric cars per se. So now that we finally have kind of, you know, leapfrog into the future a little bit with some innovative products that have come to market, I think we've really kind of shed a light on what is event related, what is shelf life, what is expiratory dating, and we haven't had to challenge ourselves. So when you have an entire case to plan for, prepare for, and prep for, again, from patient positioning to, sometimes, certain physicians like their needle driver and their suture loaded a very particular way. It's a lot of information for our OR techs, our OR nurses, our managers to compile and, again, to have a successful surgery. So I really sincerely hope that, this takeaway that everybody can get from this is understanding that, again, we have to take account for science. We have to take into account, our FDA regulations and their role. And again, their role is to regulate medical devices. They have no power or authority over hospitals. Again, it's very interesting, and quite frankly, I think I was ignorant in my early part of my career. I thought when Amy or ARON or put out a guideline that was the law, that was the gospel. And, again, in this presentation, outside of the state of New Jersey, those laws, they're not laws. They're not enforceable. They're amazing guidelines. They're tried. They're true. They're compiled by a lot of great individuals, and they come together and they compile years of data and experience. And it's an amazing job with these governing bodies put together. But then it's up to us in the operating room as end users to, strive to do our best for our patients. And so I think a lot of times you will find that there's a little bit of confusion in the marketplace. And so hopefully, again, I could shed some light on, the role of the FDA, the role of the accrediting bodies, and as well as your hospital and what you can do. So I have found that, when you have a strong policy in place, regardless if you choose event-related, if you choose expiratory dating, if that policy is put in place and it's followed by whomever organization you're following, Amy, ARON, that's the most powerful tool that I think that we all have in our arsenal, is to, do our homework, read our IFUs, read the science, understand the individual roles regarding, again, the FDA, regarding our accrediting bodies, and then putting that policy in place and adhering to said policy. And I think that will greatly clear up any little misconceptions or confusion as to the specific details. So I just wanted to thank everybody for your time. I know I'm the last speaker of the day. Again, I hope that, I was able to shed some light on, again, what is event related? How does it apply? What is expiratory dating? How does it apply? And hopefully you feel a little bit more empowered to be that patient advocate that we all are, and to make sure that we have the most successful case outcome for that patient. I take a lot of pride in knowing that I've helped a lot of complete strangers throughout the course of my career, and always doing the best of my ability to adhere to our guidelines and our rules, and making sure that, again, somebody's loved one and that person on that table, has a successful operation. So I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for all your hard work and diligence, and I appreciate everything that everybody does. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is below. I look forward to hearing from everybody and anybody, and answering any questions that you might have. So I thank you all. I appreciate you all, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you, Tom, for that great discussion on all of those topics. If you have additional questions that you want to ask Tom, please feel free to connect with him via email, and he will gladly follow up with you. As our day comes to a close, I would once again like to thank today's premier event sponsor, One Tray IST. Without their support, this exciting day of virtual learning would not have been possible. And a special thank you to our industry experts for joining us in this virtual event. allowing them to share their expertise with all of us has been very helpful today and very enjoyable. I'd also like to recognize all of the professionals who reprocess surgical instruments across the globe. For all of you who chose to spend the day educating yourself, we would like to thank you for your dedication to professional development and best practice. Just as a reminder, you will find additional bonus CE content in the Downloadable Resources tab, so make sure you check out these additional CE opportunities. At this session's close, you will be directed to the conference survey page. From there, you can download your CE certificate for today's 6 live sessions. All of today's sessions are available on demand, so you can rewatch, share, and continue to access the downloadable resources and bonus CE content provided to you. On behalf of myself and my co-host, Bobby Parker, we'd like to thank you again for joining us. To all of our healthcare professionals, stay safe out there, and as always, keep fighting dirty. We will see you next time.